You are watching The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's begin with the headlines we're tracking currently. In the United States, police have arrested nearly 300 students protesting against Israel's war on Gaza in a raid on New York's Columbia University and the City College of New York. Former US President Donald Trump has acknowledged that he told the Secret Service he wanted to go to the US Capitol on the 6th of January, depicting a different tone of an event that became a contentious detail of a former White House aide's testimony before the House committee that investigated this attack. The Arizona Senate has voted to repeal the state's 1864 ban on abortion, which could have otherwise taken effect within weeks. A group of newspapers, including the New York Daily News and Chicago Tribune, sued Microsoft and OpenAI in a New York federal court, accusing them of misusing reporters' work to train their generative artificial intelligence systems. In a first, a migrant whose asylum application was rejected by the United Kingdom was sent to Rwanda under a voluntary scheme, according to reports in the British press. Dubai airports and 2 airlines have issued a travel advisory to passengers flying out of Dubai International and Al Maktoum International Airport to gear up for delays due to rain and traffic ahead of the inclement weather. Southeast Asia is grappling with a brutal heat wave as record high temperatures have led to school closures and triggered urgent health warnings across the region. Well, our big focus, protests over the war in Gaza erupted on Columbia University's campus since mid-April, as we've been covering. But this has inspired demonstrations at other universities across just the US and as well now in Canada and Europe too. We've seen scenes playing out across France and Italy, but this escalation has come in the face of intense crackdowns that actually involve local law enforcement and university orders to shut down encampments, often without considering students' central demand that their schools divest any investments in Israel. University of California in Los Angeles has now cancelled classes after groups of protesters clashed overnight after pro-Israel demonstrators tried to pull down barricades surrounding a pro-Palestinian encampment. In fact, police burst into a building occupied by anti-war protesters at Columbia University in New York as well. That's the latest we can share with you from the United States.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. When will the president himself, not his mouthpieces, condemn these hate-filled little Gazas? President Biden needs to denounce Hamas's campus sympathizers without equivocating about Israelis fighting a righteous war of survival.
Americans have the right to peacefully protest. They have the right to peacefully protest as long as it's within the law and that it's peaceful. Forcibly taking over a building is not peaceful. It's just not. Students have the right to feel safe. They have the right to learn. They have the right to do this without disruption.
Meanwhile, the United House of Representatives has actually overwhelmingly passed a bill that would expand the federal definition of anti-Semitism, despite opposition from civil liberty groups. Now, the bill was passed by the House by a margin of 320 to 91, and it is largely seen as a reaction to the ongoing anti-war protests that are unfolding on US university campuses. It now goes to the Senate for further consideration. Meanwhile, in other news from the US, former US President Donald Trump has said that he asked his Secret Service detail to take him to the Capitol after his speech at the Ellipse on January 6, 2021, acknowledging a key detail of his actions that were central to the findings of the House committee that established to investigate the attack. Now, during a campaign rally, Donald Trump brought up a sensational but disputed element of testimony given to the House on the Jan 6th committee by a Trump White House aide that Mr. Trump had lunged for the wheel and physically struggled with Secret Service agents when they refused to take him to join that large crowd of supporters who were marching towards the Capitol back in 2021 in January. President Biden's campaign immediately highlighted that Donald Trump's comments, they amplified that the former president had actually intended to participate in what would have become an attack by his supporters on the Capitol in an effort to overturn Joe Biden's victory back in the 2020 election. In crucial news, the Arizona Senate has voted to repeal the state's 1864 ban on abortion, which could have otherwise have taken effect within weeks. The Arizona Senate has voted to repeal the state's Civil War-era abortion ban, with 2 Republicans crossing party lines to overturn the measure. Now, it is a rare example of lawmakers responding to mounting public outrage over near-total abortion bans since Roe v. Wade was overturned nearly 2 years ago. The bill now goes to Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs, who said she'll sign it into law. But abortion access in Arizona has been in the flux since last month, when the state Supreme Court ruled that an abortion ban from 1864, before Arizona was a state and decades before women were allowed to vote, could go into effect later this summer. Now, the 160-year-old measure only makes an exception for saving the life of the pregnant person and makes it a felony to perform or help someone obtain an abortion. Switching tracks, more news organizations, including the New York Daily News, Chicago Tribune, the Orlando Sentinel, the San Jose Mercury News, and 4 others in the US are suing OpenAI and Microsoft for alleged copyright infringement. These publications claim that both OpenAI and Microsoft trained on their articles without compensation or permission. The plaintiffs included, as evidence, several excerpts from conversations with both ChatGPT and Copilot, showing that both chatbots reproduced lengthy excerpts of specific articles on command, indicating that their training data sets included the text of those articles. My colleague Vishal Vivek has further details for us.
8 US newspapers have sued OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement. New York Daily News and Chicago Tribune are among the newspapers that have accused the companies of misusing reporters' work to train their generative artificial intelligence systems. The media organizations allege that millions of articles have been unlawfully copied by the companies to train AI products, including Microsoft's Copilot and OpenAI's ChatGPT. An executive editor for the Media News Group and Tribune Publishing was quoted as saying that Microsoft and OpenAI can't be allowed to expand a big tech playbook of stealing to build their own businesses. OpenAI has said that the company takes great care in its products and design process to support news organizations. The newspapers suing Microsoft and ChatGPT maker OpenAI have asked the court for unspecified monetary damages. They have also asked the court for an order blocking any further infringement. This is not the first time OpenAI has found itself in copyright infringement soup. The company was sued by the New York Times in December last year over use of its content to train generative AI. In September, a group of authors, including celebrated writer George R.R. Martin, filed a lawsuit accusing the company of systematic stealing on a mass scale. With trouble brewing over use of published materials to train ChatGPT, OpenAI announced partnerships last year seeking to address the concerns. It remains to be seen how effective those partnerships have been.
Well, also on the World 24/7, we have a special guest joining us. He has been called the Nostradamus of US presidential elections. Alan Lichtman, who is a history professor, has been teaching at the American University in Washington for half a century and has correctly predicted the result of 9 of the past 10, and even the one that got away in 2000, he insists, was stolen from Al Gore. But now he is gearing up for perhaps his greatest challenge, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, second time. He developed his now famous 13 keys to the White House, a method for predicting presidential election results that every 4 years tantalizes the media, intrigues political operatives, and provokes sniping from pollsters as well. Mr. Lichtman says the 2024 race is too early to call, but that a lot would have to go wrong for one candidate to lose. He joins us on the World 24/7. Thank you for making time for us, Mr. Lichtman. The burning political question: who do you think has the edge in the 2024 US presidential elections? The polls don't look great for Joe Biden as we speak.
I haven't made a final prediction yet, but I do have a model, the 13 keys to the White House, which have been correct since 1984, 10 elections in a row. And the way it works is if 6 or more of the 13 keys go against the White House party, they are predicted losers. Fewer than 6, they are predicted winners. And right now, a lot would have to go wrong for Joe Biden to lose this election. He is at the moment down only 2 keys, and there are 4 keys that are shaky: third party, social unrest, and foreign policy success and failure. All 4 of those keys would have to fall against the White House party to predict their defeat.
So what are the 2 keys that have already fallen for Joe Biden?
It's based on my system, not on the polls. My system taps into the underlying structure of elections, which are votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And the reasons that I think Biden has the edge, although I've made no final prediction, is as the incumbent president, he automatically wins 2 of my keys: incumbency and party contest, because he's not contested for the nomination. That means 6 keys would have to fall to predict his defeat. If he didn't run, as some pundits have argued incorrectly, it would be a much more dire situation for the Democrats. They would lose 2 keys off the top: incumbency and contest. That would mean only 4 more keys would have to fall to predict their defeat.
So you think Joe Biden is still the man to beat in 2024, but does Biden have an advantage despite many polls that show him trailing Donald Trump?
Let me comment on the polls. Early polls have 0 predictive value. And moreover, polls are not predictors at all. They are momentary snapshots. You know, they say if the election were held today, this is where the candidates stand. But the election isn't held today. So polls are not of any value for prediction. And early polls often lead you astray, as we saw in 2016 when I predicted Donald Trump's victory contrary to the polls, or in 1988 when George H.W. Bush, as late as May and June of the election year, was 17 points behind his opponent Mike Dukakis and went on to win handily, almost a 25-point swing. That's why I tell everyone, forget the polls, forget the pundits, keep your eye on the big picture as gauged by the keys. And as I've said, Biden is only down 2 keys right now, and all 4 shaky keys would have to fall against him to predict his defeat. That could happen, and that's why I haven't made a final prediction yet.
But American voters don't seem to be particularly happy with their choices. In fact, both Biden and Trump seem to be unpopular with voters. Has this ever happened before?
Absolutely. We saw that, for example, in the election of 1992, which pitted the incumbent president, George H.W. Bush, the Republican, against his Democratic challenger, Bill Clinton. And those 2 candidates were so unpopular that for the first and still only time in American history, a third party or independent candidate actually beat both of them in the polls. And that was Ross Perot. And in the spring of 1992, he was actually well ahead of both Bush and Clinton, showing how discontented voters were. That didn't hold, of course, when you got to the election, but it was an indicator.
But as far as Trump's ongoing trials are concerned, you know, many of Donald Trump's fans say they believe he's being unfairly prosecuted, and echoing Trump himself, that his criminal trial would eventually boost his standing at the polls. Do you think Trump's legal troubles have had any effect on his popularity?
Well, not so far. But let me say this. I'm not a psychic with a crystal ball. I'm not like Speaker Mike Johnson, who thinks he has a pipeline to the Almighty. The keys are based on history. They're very robust because retrospectively they go all the way back to the horse and buggy days of politics, 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected, and forward, predictably, they go all the way back to 1984. But because they're based on history, it's possible that there could be such a cataclysmic, unprecedented event that could change or influence elections outside the context of the keys. And one such possibility is Trump's legal troubles. He is right now sitting on the dock in New York in a criminal trial, facing 34 felony counts of falsely reporting his hush money payments to the porn star Stormy Daniels, to illegally deceive the electorate and deceive the government. And if he's convicted of serious felonies, that could, outside the context of the keys, shake up the race. Remains to be seen whether he's convicted or not and what the effect would be.
Meanwhile, do you think student protests in the US will be one of the hurdles to Biden's re-election? Is it likely to materialize into political poison for him ahead of November?
Well, one of my keys is social unrest. And I indicated that was one of the shaky keys that could turn against Biden. It hasn't yet, because for social unrest to turn against the White House party, it has to be sustained, right, and it has to be of sufficient magnitude to threaten the stability of the country. Right now, we've seen, something like 48 and 50 college protests out of 6,000 college campuses. That's less than 1%. And we've seen less than 1% of the students participating. So it remains to be seen whether these protests will be sustained over time and whether they'll become significant enough to threaten the stability of the country. So keep your eye on that key.
Right, as we wrap, take us through Alan Lichtman's 13 keys to the White House.
As I said, my keys probe the strength and performance primarily of the White House party. Only one key has anything to do with the challenger, and it's a very high threshold keys. So my keys are the mandate key, based on the last midterm election, incumbency, contest for the incumbent party nomination, third party, whether there's no recession in the election year, the long-term growth record of the incumbent party, policy change, scandal, social unrest, foreign policy successes and failures. And then the last two keys are the only ones that have anything to do with the candidates. Key 12 is whether the incumbent party candidate is one of those once-in-a-generation, truly inspirational candidates, like Franklin Roosevelt on the Democratic side or Ronald Reagan on the Republican side. And Joe Biden's kind of a vanilla candidate, and thus he loses that key. The last key is the only one pertaining to the challenger, and it says the challenging candidate is not one of those once-in-a-generation inspirational candidates, and I rate that as true, because while Trump is a great showman, he only appeals to a narrow segment of the election. He's not broadly appealing, like Franklin Roosevelt, who won 4 landslide elections, or Ronald Reagan, who won 2 landslide elections. Donald Trump actually lost the popular vote by 10 million votes combined, right, in his 2 presidential runs.
Well, Alan Lichtman, thank you so much for making time for us and joining us on The World 24/7 on the NDTV network. We'll keep tracking the latest developments for you here on NDTV 24/7. For now, we're stepping into a very short break. Welcome back. Dubai airports and 2 airlines have issued a travel advisory to passengers flying out of Dubai International and Al Maktoum International Airport to gear up for delays due to rain and traffic ahead of the inclement weather. In fact, passengers have been urged to check their flight status with their respective airline and consider arriving at the airport earlier than usual to accommodate any delays or queues caused by the weather. Now, in fact, extra time has been advised by officials at the security, but earlier in April, as we had reported, and as you can see on the left side of your screens, Dubai had received more than a year and a half's worth of rainfall just in 24 hours on the 14th and 15th of April that actually submerged the city, including its airport and most of the freeways. 4 people, unfortunately, also lost their lives because of the flooding in Dubai. Their weather office recorded 254 mm of rainfall, the highest in 75 years, when the records actually began by the National Center of Meteorology at UAE. There was also heavy rainfall reported in Bahrain and parts of Saudi Arabia mid-April, and now Dubai airports and 2 airlines have issued a travel advisory to passengers flying out of Dubai International Airport as well as Al Maktoum International Airport. In other crucial news, Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has ordered an increase in weapons production for the war in Ukraine. His ministry has confirmed this days after the United States approved a delayed multi-billion-dollar military aid package for the Ukrainian government. In fact, at a meeting with Russia's top military brass, Mr. Shoigu said the volume, quality and speed of arms production needed boosting, and also ordered the repair of units on the front lines in Ukraine's east and south to improve their efficiency. This is what the Ministry of Defense has said on Telegram. In other news, Southeast Asia is enduring a brutal record-setting heat wave. For several days, temperatures have soared from India to the Philippines, northward into Japan. As Southeast Asia grapples with a brutal heat wave, record high temperatures have led to school closures and triggered urgent health warnings across the region. In fact, this year, Cambodia has been facing the highest temperatures in 170 years. The government there has forecast that temperatures in most parts of the country could reach about 43 degrees Celsius this week. Meanwhile, Myanmar, their townships in central Magwe, Mandalay, and Bago divisions experienced unprecedented high temperatures. If we talk about northern Thailand, temperatures have topped 44 degrees Celsius in some areas, while the capital Bangkok and other metropolitan areas have witnessed temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius. And finally, to a celebrated first-generation Indian American who is a vegan chef and a Food Network champion, Priyanka Nayak's path took her from pre-med and economics to a career in media and tech, including several years as an executive at X, before launching a full-time journey into the culinary world, emerging as a chef, merging Eastern traditions with Western culinary techniques. She spoke to NDTV. Listen in.
Not many can claim to have built a 6-figure business after being laid off from their corporate job. Priyanka Nayak has achieved exactly that. Nayak has been working on her brand Chef Priyanka for many years now. She specializes in vegan and eco-friendly recipes and prides herself on not wasting a single ingredient in her kitchen.
My passion for cooking probably started much earlier than I may realize. I think being the youngest of 3 girls, I was always in the kitchen with my mom because she had to keep an eye on me. So I feel like I kind of learned and appreciated food through osmosis, just like watching my mom cook.
Nayak followed the conventional route of going to university in the US and working corporate jobs. But she always cooked alongside her professional career. Right when she was planning on leaving X, formerly known as Twitter, they let her go. She knew there was no better time than then to become a full-time chef.
Some of the obstacles I faced were I am self-taught, so the credibility in the culinary industry was very hard for me to earn, because if you don't go to culinary school, they were like, well, how are you a quote-unquote chef? Oh, you don't work in a restaurant full-time. How are you chef? Oh, you're vegan? No. Or you're Indian? Oh, you're just going to make Indian food? So they kind of pigeonholed me into all these places. And I think for not only a self-taught chef, but a female brown woman cooking plant-based vegan food adds so many more obstacles.
It was only when Nayak became a Food Network champion that she was able to reach more people and expand her own brand. Today, she has an established audience who watch her content to practice more eco-friendly cooking.
A lot of what I do is saying like, hey, if you go to the grocery store or the farmer's market and you get carrots with the carrot tops, like don't throw those out. They're highly nutritious. You just have to make sure you wash them thoroughly and you can put it in the air fryer and make chips. Or you can take mango peels and make sure you wash them thoroughly and you could blend it down into a chutney. Or you could take watermelon rinds and dry it and make a pickle out of it.
Well, I can't wait to try these recipes out for myself. I'm Nandini Gupta reporting for NDTV in New York.
Well, thank you for investing your time and watching this episode of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest developments for you. Do stay tuned.